Good afternoon, Earth. This is Adam Sturch, broadcasting from the Mushroom Mansion, Taos, New Mexico, starting on an as-of-yet unnamed oil painting. I've got a variety of colors mixed up. Most of my paintings lately, I've noticed I've started with a very simple monotone. So this one I'm going to lay down a thin coat of thinner and use a variety of colors in different areas and maybe blend them together a little bit and just kind of start a multicolored ground to base whatever develops from that on.
From disempowering yourself with regard to what you view as important. Which is more important to you, your opinion or Ted Koppel's opinion? It's got to be your opinion, because these other things are just chimeras. They're myths in the electronic night. The other side of that is the toxicity of ideology. But ideology itself is poisonous. That in the 15th and 16th century, it was like 120 years of intermittent religious war because people were so uptight about whether or not you were a Catholic or a Huguenot or a Walloon or all this stuff, these were life and death issues, and finally people just became sick of it. And I choose to believe that we may be approaching such a watershed with the social ideologies that have just been digging themselves into the global population for the past 100 years. They are extremely bankrupt. The notion of any kind of serious competition between Marxist-Leninism and capitalist democratic techno-fascism, or whatever it is ludicrous. Neither system works in the presence of the need to wage ideological warfare against the other. And yet it's fairly clear that each society could function quite well if it didn't have that burden. And similarly, in many microcosms of that situation around the world, it's clear that ideology has become some kind of anachronism. It's a kind of lack of good taste. It's like being a nut, so that you come on with some ideology and people just look at their plate and they're embarrassed for you. And well, they should be, because that butter's no bread. That's just a big pain in the neck. The ideology which naturally claims our attention is pretty well understood. It's like it says in the Old Testament, you can know the truth. The truth is the still small voice in your heart. We don't have to take courses in theology and ethics to get all this down. The political agenda is fairly clear. You feed people, you cure disease, you anticipate and solve social problems having to do with sewage disposal, distribution of land and wealth, so forth and so on. Who's kidding who? None of this stuff is controversial unless you're living inside a locked ward, which we seem to be doing. So, more and more, this anti-ideological position has to be articulated. It's no big deal about how you cause language to evolve. You cause language to evolve by saying new and intelligent things to each other. And then other people say, oh, well, so this thing that I've always thought but never felt like saying is actually legitimate and okay, and I can say it and I will say it, and then it begins to move like a wave through society. You will be told that for me to advocate the poisonous nature of ideology without calling it anarchy is to peddle my own private ideology. But this is absurd. It's like saying if someone tells you not to drive, that they're advocating a certain style of driving. that isn't it at all, you know? It's a translation of levels. It's something entirely different. Both of these things, the toxic nature of ideology and the importance of the felt presence of immediate experience, can be brought together under the notion that we cannot afford the continued existence of what has been called throughout most of the 20th century the unconscious. That the unconscious is actually a kind of neurotic excuse for not getting our act together as a species. It is a kind of infantilism, a giving of permission by each of us to all of us to not get our act together. And the way in which the unconscious is eliminated is by turning the language machinery back upon itself and reflecting on the process of attention. This is what Buddhism is all about. Attention to attention, awareness of the modality of the cognitive process. Don't be fooled by yourself. Don't be made a sucker by yourself. Just rise above that possibility by paying attention. Attention to attention causes the light of language to fall into these dark and unilluminated corners where infantilism is tolerated in the individual personality. To oneself has a kind of a morphogenic field effect, a kind of chain reaction which sweeps through society. This is, I believe, what all these gurus are always trying to say in a somewhat, I don't know, more concrete and therefore somewhat less convincing fashion. But it's simply that the act of conscious self-inspection creates more conscious people, which create a more conscious society, which erodes the possibility of the poisonous and toxic effects of ideology. This is what psychedelics were and are about in terms of their social position and their legal position in society. Psychedelics are illegal not because a loving government is concerned that you may jump out of a third-story window. Psychedelics are illegal because they dissolve opinion structures and culturally laid down models of behavior and information processing. They open you up to the possibility that everything you know is wrong. And, government and society spend a lot of money educating you into being a loyal worker, consumer, debt payer, and citizen. So if anarchy is to have a meaning, and I think it is the great future for human society, because what it means is only responsible human beings can exist in an anarchistic society. To the degree that people are responsible, we will have anarchy. And the reason America, I believe, historically, has been so successful is because it's really a place where you can almost get away with anything. And if that is lost, if monolithic ideologies throw a damper on that, then cultural momentum will pass to other cultures. In fact, to some degree, I see this coming. We had a conversation with a prominent politician recently, and he pointed out that Japan is now the leading Western country.
Mixing up some red.
This indicates a cultural crisis of some depth for the ideals of the American Constitution. My brother is a brain scientist at the National Institute of Mental Health in Bethesda, Maryland. The crown jewel of American brain science. Everybody there is a Japanese graduate student doing work on a 2-year
Whoa,
or 3-year
don't
scholarship.
splatter the lens, fucko.
So,
I don't know if you can see
but
that
I
or
don't
not.
see or hear any
Nice red
voice
stop
from
sign, bright, pure
Japanese. I think
red.
this is the cultural model that the
Let's
West
just give it some
is
slather.
uniquely able to promulgate and perfect because it comes out of a rejection of the tradition of scientific materialism that we are responsible for and that we are most sophisticated about, where, for instance, Japan has come fairly recently to high-tech and mass industrialization. So I just basically want to leave you with that. The notion is that nature, which is the linguistically expressed topological manifold of the psyche, is an historical object that is pulling us forward, and that when we actually cross into the eschatology that appears fairly imminent, we will find it to have been anticipated by the human relationship to nature, the embedding of psyche in nature through the mysterious relationship mediated by language, and the key to unfolding a sane society, in my single humble opinion, is an obligation to reason that clearly distinguishes between reason and science, an obligation to self-involvement in immediate experience, and that means psychedelics, sexuality, and what I call time. But what I really mean is a kind of deep literary involvement with the felt presence. Psychedelics, sexuality, and time to empower the individual, to make the individual naturally responsible to create then the basis for a caring global society that will transcend the historical cultures as though we were just moving very naturally out of winter and into spring. No apocalypse, no millennium, no rescue by flying saucers, no Mayan return, simply the unfolding of understanding in a program of mutual caring and responsibility. This is the highest aspiration of the New Age, and I feel that it is attainable. So let's break, and then we'll have questions. Thank you very, very much. Is there any kind of response to this evening's talk? Wonderful. Yes.
In my daily life, I can do a yoga practice, and I can maintain a certain amount of purity of perspective through diet and through meditation, things like that. And if I take a psychedelic drug, it makes it very difficult for me to function in the world, because almost too much information comes in, or
So your question is, how do you integrate taking psychedelics into an ordinary workaday existence? Well, I don't know that it is easily integrated. I mean, I'm not sure whether you mean you can't function while it's happening, or you can't function 3 weeks afterwards. With the psychedelics, it's not a matter of high frequency, I think. The good trips are usually good for plenty of rumination for a long time. The harder the hit, the longer you want to ponder it before you go that route again. It isn't like a practice. It isn't like something you do daily. It's more like unique act of courage that arises out of the substratum of ordinary daily existence, whether it be profane or sacred. There really isn't an answer to your question. As long as we're part of the worker anthill or living in a society which makes tremendous demands on us, it's going to be a problem. The way to take psychedelics is, you must have seen these t-shirts which say, "I take drugs seriously." Well, that's the way to take them, which means rarely and at substantially challenging doses, and in an atmosphere where there are no distractions. And by that, I mean, other people will say something different, but I mean no light and no sound, including music, unless you're a musician or you have some special relationship to music. But really, what you're trying to see is the surface of the brain-mind interface. And to the degree that you can create a situation of sensory deprivation, you will have a greater expectation of succeeding. Some people wouldn't dream of tripping without music, but I find that, it becomes the trip. The whole thing then becomes about that piece of music, where in silence it would have been equally audially interesting. So it isn't, the early model of the psychedelic experience was sort of that you eat an orange and look at art books and listen to Bach's choral preludes. But that art historical approach to it doesn't give enough credit to the power of the substance. I mean, it can lift veil after veil in silent darkness to just catapult you into endlessly undulating tapestries of organic beauty, and there need be no sensory input. In fact, shouldn't be for this to happen. You had a question.
I was wondering about practical sort of tips, how do you take something back? Sort of like going to the Magic Kingdom and wanting to take back a golden piece with you, or a key, or something, because I lose it,
Well, I think I sort of touched on this obliquely tonight, that attention to attention, or paying attention to the nuances of cognition, is a psychedelic way of being. I mean, if any of you are familiar with Marcel Proust's Recherche de Temps Perdu, he didn't take drugs except for laudanum and valerian and alcohol and absinthe and tobacco and things like that. So he was drug-free, and he managed to refine, this art of just the awareness of the tensions and nuances in the moment. For really, what I have come to believe about the psychedelic experience is that it is simply a compressed instance of what we call
All right, that was a whole lot of fun.
understanding.
Kind of got some idea of where it's headed now, but it's still going to be kind of surprising to me as well. Just going to develop this one as it does, and sort of, play with that. So, that's it for the moment. That's Adam Sturch broadcasting from the Mushroom Mansion, Taos, New Mexico, working on oil painting, as of yet unnamed. Have a good afternoon, Earth.
And this is a process.